Hello, everybody. Welcome to What Would Your Ideal World Be? A new podcast which examines many important people and the important things in their lives, what they think about most current trends at the moment, what they think about certain subject matters, and of course, what their ideal world would be.
Special series I'm having covering the London Mayoral election 2021. Today's guest will be Steve Kelleher. He has been a major business person throughout his life, working in both recruitment and in the City of London financial centre. He's run for the mayoralty under the Social Democratic Party, otherwise known as the SDP for short, ticket, having previously stood for the Brexit Party during the 2019 general election in the state of Eltham in London, of which he came fourth.
Hello?
Edward, hi.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning to you too. Thank you for coming on.
See you.
Okay, sure. I'll start then. Before I actually do start, I hope you don't mind me doing so, giving a quick tribute to, because it's your party, so it's a late tribute to the late Baroness Shirley Williams, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, indeed.
One of the heroes of one of the titans of modern British politics. Whatever your political views are, she definitely left an impact and so on, and especially in the founding of your party. So yeah, I just wanted to pay a quick tribute to her. I mean, it's a little late, but it's relevant to this.
No, it's never too late. It's never too late. It's sad passing at 90 years of age, but most importantly, she really did make an amazing impact on British politics, and really probably should have been the first female prime minister. But she made a decision to break from Labour, and we are her legacy, I guess. Many people, including me, Edward, didn't even know the SDP existed a few years ago, because I was old enough to remember the split in '81.
All right.
And then I remember the SDP becoming the SDLP, and then morphing into eventually the Liberal Democrats. So I thought the SDP had just ceased to exist. And I think that's probably where 99% of British electors currently stand as well. They don't know the SDP exists. So the main reason for me standing to be mayor, well, there's quite a few reasons, but the SDP reason is we actually are a national party. We are contesting not just here in London, but up in Hartlepool, in Airdrie and Stott, where there are by-elections. We have a national party with national policies, but no one knows we exist. And we've been going for 40 years. So it's time to up the volume. And my candidacy, I hope, puts the name back in people's. And I'm still, I'm a very optimistic person, Edward, so I'm still not saying I'm out of the fight, but let's just say the doors to media are closed tight, they're shut tight. And you do, it seems to me, either need to have an awful lot of money or have a very large, footprint in social media before you even consider attempting, to get into a real sort of political sort of arena, because nobody wants to talk to you, nobody wants to put you on their TV or radio stations. I'm probably going to get lots of interviews after the 8th of May, or after the election closes and the announcements are made. But right now, I have to get out on the street and I have to meet people and hope that there is word of mouth, because social media is similarly, it's very difficult to break in, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, sure. And the first question I want to ask you actually is if you are actually properly elected. The first question is that you've just been elected, let's say hypothetically, you've been elected as Mayor of London. You just entered City Hall and I get to use your surroundings. What is the first major policy that you work on and why?
Well, the very first thing I would do, remembering that the mayor only really has sort of two areas where there's true power, which is with TfL and with the Metropolitan Police, the first thing I would do would be to arrange to meet with Cressida Dick, and then with the senior management of the Met Police, the serious organised crime unit, and given that I have immediate authority and influence, I would be working to build very close relationships with the Metropolitan Police. I know, because I have friends in the police, that the relationship between the current mayor and the Met Police is very strained. He is not a leader. And we saw most recently in those dreadful scenes at Clapham, not far from where I was brought up, the protest was poorly handled all around, but it's not the police's fault that they are enforcing bad laws. There are bad laws being pushed through Parliament over the course of this pandemic, and whilst it was mishandled and nobody came out of that situation in any good light, thank heavens no one was injured. But the first thing that Mayor did was throw the police under the bus and say, I don't like your reasons, please go away and come back with an inquiry as to why this occurred. Typical of what the current relationship is between the Mayor's office and the Met Police. That will change with me, because one thing the SDP strongly believe in, we're quite left-wing when it comes to economic policies, but certainly very much more conservative stroke traditional when it comes to cultural things. And with regards to the police and the army, we are patriotic and strong supporters of law and order. And we believe that the police should be part of the community, not a distant, semi-armed military force, but they need to be backed. They need to be shown respect, not just by their leaders, but by the people, the residents of London. And part of my first thing, if you asked, the first thing I would be doing would be repairing the relationships with the Met Police, backing them, giving them the resources they need. I would also be strongly redirecting some of those resources. Mayor Khan has a very clear identitarian outlook on the world. And I can't even define, I don't think anyone can truly define the word woke, so I don't even like using it. But what I would state is that police resources being funneled into the monitoring of speech on social media that hurts feelings and upsets people is not as important as money spent on stopping people being stabbed and murdered in the streets of London. And the recent Sewell report came out with a shocking statistic that I couldn't believe, but it is true, that for every white person murdered in England, 24 black people are murdered in England. And yet we stand here stating that stop and search is racial profiling, stop and search is racist, stop and search it divides communities. I'm not saying stop and search is the answer. What I'm saying is 24 black people die for every white person dying in murder. That is utterly unacceptable. And we need to get politics out of policing completely. The police commissioners and the police commanders in their local areas should have complete authority. They know who the bad guys are. They know where the criminals congregate, and they should have the manpower to keep the streets safe. So my number one, even though, well, let's say my number one policy is housing, but that's probably the area where I have less power. Where a mayor has real power is with the police and with TfL. So to answer your question, it would be with my relationship with the Met Police.
And on that, by the way, you talk about this sort of thing. You propose to bring back community foot patrols to cut crime rates by half, is what your manifesto says, if I'm not mistaken. How would these work, and how would they reduce crime? Like how they operate to, cut the crime down by half, like you say.
Again, let's just say there's a sort of golden thread through these policies, in that neighbourhood and community are what are at the basis, and communitarian politics are effectively the DNA of the Social Democratic Party. We believe in, let's say, in the last 40 years, there's been too much individualism, too much me, and not enough we. So housing is at the basis of this, creating good neighbourhoods. When you have people who are born and raised in an area at the top of a list for council housing, you maintain neighbourhoods. When there's neighbourhoods, there are people who become adjuncts to the police. They see stuff going on, the policeman is their friend, and community action leads to lower crime. So the police need to be regular parts of the community. Again, in an administration where I had the power to build housing, and there is power there, but there are very, very, big, I would say, vested interests that seem at the moment to be in complete control. I believe that there should be police housing. So these are the police are a necessary part of the community. More police on the street, more police being known to neighbourhoods adds to a sense of well-being and safety. And whilst we are in a new world of mobile phones and texting, and crime now is happening at a faster pace in that way, communication is digital. At the same time, the police need the resources to handle that, and it would be a real priority for me as mayor that the police are funded and supported, and all efforts made to create the right attitude to the police by Londoners, that they are our strong friends.
Mm-hmm. And another part of your plan, if I'm not mistaken, is to introduce free public transport for young people to help them start new businesses and find work. How would free public transport work for them in doing that? And how else do you plan to make London more affordable to younger people such as myself?
Yeah, well, we were looking into this because there is a complete generational divide. Okay, young people like you, I have 5 children myself. My youngest is 21. So I have 5 children living, well, they're all over England at the moment, but as a cricket coach for the last 20 years as well, I've brought up an awful lot, and I know an awful lot of people your age. You're screwed. You're screwed. You are in a position where not only has my generation not built houses, we bought them and they're not built anymore. What's actually happening is there is an iron triangle, okay, of vested interests. You have 5 or 6 property developers, Persimmon, Bovis, Wimpey, the big names. Only 5 or 6 of them that own well over 90% of all the property that has been purchased in and around London. And they have over 1 million building permits that they're not building on. So they have banked the land. That land is expensive. They have bought that land in league with banks who've lent them enormous amounts of money to buy that land. And these 2 people together with my generation, our vested interest is that property prices go up every year. That's not a market, that's a cartel. And cartels are illegal. And yet they continue. A little fact for you, Edward, in middle of 2019, Theresa May was coming to the end of her premiership. Brexit was a disaster. We were a laughingstock, and the donors to the Tory party had abandoned them. The Tory party in May of 2019 was bust. they actually had a negative balance on their accounts. In June of 2019, they brought in Boris Johnson. And in the next 2 years, up until where we are now, those 4 or 5 building and property developing companies have donated completely legally and above board. They have donated £11 million to the Tory party. Now, what does that mean? The last 2 times Rishi Sunak has sat down after a budget, those companies' stock valuations have shot through the roof. We're in a situation where they own the land, they own the building permits, and every time Rishi Sunak comes out with a new policy, you know what the situation is in London. We have demand for property here, we have supply of property here. And every time Rishi Sunak sits down, it's because he's pushed demand up even further and done nothing about supply. Supply is deliberately constrained by the building producers, by the property developers, in league with the banks who are desperate not to lose money, and they haven't done for such a long time because property only goes up because they don't build enough of it. And currently that situation now leads to a situation where that £11 million of legally above board donations would be naive of you or I to feel that those property companies were donating to the Tory party purely because they wanted Boris to get a better haircut. The situation is they see they get value for their investment, and it's a cartel. Cartels are illegal. The cartel should be investigated by the what used to be called the sort of Mergers Commission. Was it? No, now it's called the Competitive Markets Authority, and they're CMA. I would, as mayor, immediately call for that. I wouldn't have the power because it's a government issue, but you're too young to remember Ken Livingstone in his pomp, okay? But he would in many ways be a model for my mayoralty. Why? Ken Livingstone was leader of the GLC. He was a very efficient administrator. The mayor actually should not be a politician looking to be prime minister. That's what the last one was, and that's what this one is. Sadiq Khan has got his eyes on being, prime minister in 2028.
Crikey.
But right now he needs to be re-elected, and then he'll move back to be, hopefully he'll take over from Starmer. That's definitely on his agenda. What we need is a London mayor who's boring, who is not political, who is efficient at hiring the right people, getting the right structure in place. And what I was talking about, Ken Livingstone, he made Maggie Thatcher's life a misery. Her eyes used to bleed with rage at the antics he got up to. He had, and the mayor has, a bully pulpit. Whilst I don't have the power to build 500,000 council houses, I have the power to humiliate and embarrass the government at every stage until they do. And I have the power and the bully pulpit to communicate with Londoners and demand action. We've seen recently that when people stand up, recently it was with the European Super League, a few years ago it was with Brexit, where actual voters stood up and did something that the authorities didn't particularly want to contend with. The Tory party does respond. What it is the most efficient vote gathering machine on planet Earth. It will change its policies if it gets votes. And so my strong power as mayor isn't to build all the council houses I want, but it would be to force the government to come to their senses. The Competitive Markets Authority should investigate the housing situation in London and in England. It is a cartel, in my opinion. I don't want to just pick on the Tories here, because when Tony Blair was in charge back in the 2000s. You might not know this, Edward, but that period between after the disastrous Iraq War, between sort of 2004 and the Great Financial Crisis, the Labour Party were in complete control, had a huge majority, and that is the lowest period of council house building in London's last 40 years. Appalling, disastrous. Oh, and here's another little thing. During that time, I think it was in 2005, because there was such a furore about the unaffordability of housing then, yeah, because we were in a real boom back in the early 2000s. Tony Blair and his government, his Labour government, decided that it would be a good idea to have a commission investigate whether there was a problem at all. And who do they put in charge of that commission? One of the CEOs of one of those top 5 property developers. Strangely enough, they came back and said, nothing to see, he's not a problem at all. Oh, and by the way, would you like a nice big donation to the Labour Party? Look it up, it happened. So we have a deeply structural problem. It's not going to be cured by one SDP mayor in a 3-year term, but he can make a start. And that start will be strongly looking for investment. And here's another thing. I don't want to preempt your questions, Edward, so I don't want to run ahead. But we are in a situation where, if you believe the polls, Sadiq Khan will be mayor again. He is Labour Party and socialist. We are Labour Party, but social democrat. There is a big difference in that his administration will have huge financial difficulties in the next few years because of the pandemic, because the latest suggestions, actually, there was a report out stating that they thought 12 to 15% lower transport. Let's say TfL would see 12 to 15% less people travelling. That's going to be a huge hit to revenues at the same time as the much delayed and overrun Crossrail comes in. The numbers are going to look absolutely horrible. And what will a socialist mayor do? He'll tax people who work hard and make money. He doesn't have the power, because he's not government. He doesn't have the power to tax Google or Amazon. He doesn't have the power to tax big multinationals. He only has the power to tax Londoners. And he'll put a bullshit green cloak over some of those taxes and say, oh, it's the ULEZ zone and we're trying to clean up the air. That's bullshit, and he knows it. It will not work. It's just taxing people who've got cars. It's not a green policy. It will increase traffic, because I'm telling you now, people who live out in the suburbs like me, I'm still in London, but if I drive 5 miles to see my mum, because there aren't transport links to get there easily, it would take me 15 minutes by car and an hour by transport. I have to pay, currently it'll be £3.50, soon it'll be £5, then it'll be 10, it only goes up. If I'm paying to get in my car to drive and see my mum, well, after I've seen my mum, I may as well get my money's worth. So then I'll be driving around doing other stuff, visiting other people, dropping stuff off, picking stuff up. People will want to get their money's worth. That will increase pollution. He knows it. It's just a money grab. Now, what I would do would be make money. I would be looking to make money for London. And in that area, I am passionate. It's not a pure SDP policy, but as mayor, I've worked in the city all my life. I have amazing connections. I've hired and started companies across, in finance, international finance, foreign exchange, for all of my career. You think that Virgin or Dyson or think of a big company, Apple or these are great brands. They're all too bob. They're all fly by night. They've only been here a few years, and in a few years they'll be gone. London is the best brand in the world. London has been a centre of commerce, of innovation, of empire for 1,000 years. London's been, it's been destroyed by fire, it's been destroyed by plague, it's been flattened by bombs, and yet it always pays its debts. It always comes back. It's the greatest brand on planet Earth. And I would brand London. I would be looking for investment into London. I would be offering, let's say where my powers allow, I would be offering very favourable rate holidays to businesses coming in to invest. London is one of the centres of blockchain technology. Blockchain technology is coming rather like the internet was coming 30 years ago. It was a new thing 30 years ago. I know you don't believe it, but 30 years ago, it was a newfangled thing and it might not take off. Well, guess what? Blockchain technology is the same. It's coming, and London currently is one of the 3 centres of new development. And as mayor, we have so many assets. I have so many assets within TfL, just within TfL, that I can use to attract. One of the policy issues that we just, you mentioned travel. So the 22 to 25, you've just left college, you need a helping hand. This will be a gift from the older generation to you to say, get on your feet. It will help with travel around London. It helps with the cost of living. It helps you find work because you're out finding work. Right? You can't just do it from your laptop. You have to go and meet people. You have to possibly go and work in offices. And it's a leg up to get back to work. It's not a bribe because most 22 to 25-year-olds don't even bother to register to vote. It's just the right thing to do. But secondary to that policy, you might notice, is that we have a Londoners card, where if you are resident for 5 years, you officially become a Londoner, and you will receive a Londoners card, which will initially give you, maybe within my power, I might be able to give 1 or 2 Sundays a year of free travel, but more importantly, I'll be able to ally with businesses and give Londoners discounts that non-Londoners can't have. Guess what? It's a privilege to be a Londoner. You should want to have this card. But this card won't be a piece of plastic. This card will actually be on a digital wallet on your phone. And that digital wallet will also allow me to do something quite revolutionary, but I think very, very profitable, making money for TfL. And that would be to allow you to purchase your tokens, London tokens, on the digital wallet, a bit like purchasing first class stamps. So you might remember, you buy a first class stamp, it doesn't have a date on it, it just says first class. And if that first class stamp costs, in the old days, it might cost 60p, then it's 80p, then it's £1. The fact is, when it's there and you bought it for 60p, if you don't use it until it's £1, you're still using it. It's an inflation hedge for you. More importantly, it's bringing money into London and bringing money in now. So I feel that entrepreneurial ideas like, the mayor using his power to ally with businesses, to support new businesses, to promote London, to attract investors, like, why not call it the Virgin Victoria Line for 5 years? Who cares what it's called? But if I can get Virgin to sponsor the Victoria Line, I'm quite happy to do that. It's to the benefit of Londoners. I don't think Mayor Khan will be having entrepreneurial, money-making ideas. I think he will be having money-taking ideas, and that will be to the detriment of Londoners.
One quick tidbit I wanted to go on. We were talking about like tech companies earlier. Apparently, Khan had a campaign back in like a couple of years ago to make sure they paid the less tax or something like that, which is a bit weird for a Labour guy, but that's comes with
Well, put it
his
this
stuff, I
way,
guess.
I'm not aware of that actually. So if that is the case, I'm all in favour of promoting young new business, and I would want to be a very favourable mayor to young new business. Just like at the same time, I would be doing everything in my power, to make sure people pay a fair rate of tax, and that means a higher rate of tax for those who can afford it, the broader shoulders that they always talk about. But there are shoulders that pay no tax in London, and they are the foreign owners of properties. And I would be making it a priority that rates on second homes, rates on foreign held properties would be, well, let's say they would be a centre of my attention and an obvious target for revenue increase. So once I were in the office with the budget, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but when Mr. Khan took over, City Hall and the staff that support the role of Mayor of London, the annual wage bill was £38 million a year. 5 years later, it's £65 million a year for the mayor's office. That's an amazing increase. And I don't know what he's doing for that money or what he's getting for that money, but I would be, again, hugely looking to reduce the footprint that the mayor takes. I have no ambition to be the next prime minister. I have every ambition to make London a happier, safer and wealthier place.
The next thing I wanted to ask you actually was that you were talking about housing earlier. You want to build 50,000 more council homes, of which would be more favourable towards Londoners who have been born and have lived in their specific borough, using a super bonus in order to keep families based in the capital together. How would such council houses do that?
Right. So first up, we can't, I believe, by law, take away your right. At the moment, it's a legal right. There's a right to buy. If you are in a council flat in London for more than 2 years, you have the right to buy that property at 20% lower than where it currently is valued. Okay, and that is the reason, well, one of the main reasons why we're in such a terrible situation. What's happened is that the law, when it changed back in the 1990s, was that, yes, you could buy council houses, but we promised to build the council more, for every one you buy, we'll build one. That was a lie. That was a plain lie. And what's happened is the council houses have been bought and no new ones have been built. And then therefore property prices have gone through the roof and everyone thinks they're an investment genius when actually they're just part of a government bubble. So new council houses, you would not be allowed to buy. I would not allow you to buy council houses that I built. I don't have the power to change the law. I'm only a mayor. But what I can do is, let's just say there will be a contract where the tenant forgoes his right to buy. He doesn't have to sign that contract, but he might not get that tenancy, let's just say. So there are ways around laws without breaking them, where we would be making sure that SDP built council houses would not be sold to the tenants. It's one of the reasons, again, why we're in this situation. No local council has an incentive, you go out and you build 500 houses. 2 years later, they're all bought. You've got to go out and build them again. Your assets gone and it's cost you 20%. And you've been bent over backwards by the property developer who's lied to you and who doesn't fulfill the contract and then comes back and says, well, sue me and I've got better lawyers than you. Oh, by the way, I'll tell you what, I'll re-tarmac that old school playground over there. Let's call it quits. It's a huge power imbalance at the moment. And all the power is with the developers. Local councils are screwed. As mayor, I would try to redress that balance. It would be deeply unpopular. And it would almost, if I'm successful, I would get voted out. Because what you have to remember is people like me, people who own properties, don't want 500 council flats built at the end of their road. They want them built, but just not near them. And if you have just, Edward, worked your nuts off for years and bought your first 350 grand 2-bedroom flat, and I come and build 100 nicer flats round the corner from you where you can rent them for £200 a week, your property will go from 350 to 250 very quickly, and you'll hate me and want to vote me out. But it is the answer. And that's why building council houses that you can't buy is the right answer for 8 million people in London. It's not the right answer for property owners. And it's definitely not the right answer for the banks. And they are hugely at risk to the property developers, and the property developers have bought the Tory party.
The next thing I want to ask you, speaking of party policies, is that your party claims to be patriotic and culturally conservative and traditional, while being economically left-leaning, as you were talking about earlier. How do such views coalesce into a coherent political ideology, and how that would benefit Londoners of all stripes?
Again, this is where, let's say, part of our USP is we don't have big donors. This campaign, my campaign, we've not got a single donor because the legal definition of donor is £500. If you donate less than £500, it's not a donation. So we don't have a single donor. We haven't had one donation that got to 500 quid. I think actually I might have done it because I paid my £10 to join, and then I put £499 in. So I actually now have to declare that I am a donor to my own campaign. But because we don't have big donors, because we don't have big unions or corporations backing us, we are very, very happy to take policies from left or right if we think it makes life better. Many of our policies have been, over the last few years, have been stolen by other parties. That's fine. That's fine. If I can influence the government to make a policy shift, if the SDP can build enough momentum in the country behind one of their policies, the Tory party, who look like they're in power till at least 2028, will shift their policies towards it. We saw that happen with Brexit, didn't we? The Brexit Party started stealing Tory votes. Back in 2014, that coward Cameron saw Miliband looking like he might be Prime Minister material, and he saw UKIP stealing millions of his votes. So he gave us a referendum, the most disastrous decision of my lifetime. But once, and here's something that many people don't understand, but once that decision was made, this is a game theory and logic, but try and work with me on this one. The moment the decision was made to give a referendum, there could only be one logical vote, and that must be to leave. Now, let me explain why. Right? Equilibrium before the introduction of the referendum was we were one of the big contributors to Europe. In fact, we had a fantastic deal with Europe. And our position was always that we could leave, but we choose not to. We choose not to leave. We are part of the project. We will leave if you push us, but don't worry, we are not here to leave. Once there was a referendum, you had to vote leave because there was no equilibrium, there was no post-referendum outcome that would be as good as the pre-referendum equilibrium. Think of it this way. You go back to Europe the day after a referendum where you voted to remain. Okay, think of it that. Equilibrium has now monstrously shifted against the UK. Why? We've taken leaving off the table. A year or two later, Germany would have come to us and said, give us £1 billion. Actually, no, give us £2 billion a year. And we go, no, why should we do that? And they're like, well, you know, Portugal, skin, Italy, skin, we need more money, and we've decided you've got to pay for it. And we go, no, we're not paying for that. If you keep trying to make us pay for it, we're going to, oh, no, we're not going to leave, are we? There we are. We'd have to hand over the money. Power would have been immediately, our equilibrium position was shattered prior to the vote by the fact that we even had one. It was a disaster. And there was no going back. We would have gone back, a Remain vote would have taken us back to a much worse position. The only thing a Leave vote does is give you the option of possibly things being better down the line after an awful lot of pain. But nobody ever thought we'd have 3.5, 4 years of the most disastrous parliament trying to stop things happening. So yeah, we were in a bind, and Cameron is to blame, and I think the worst prime minister of my lifetime. There was a great tweet recently saying, isn't it a nightmare to think that Boris Johnson is only the third worst prime minister we've had in the last 10 years? You know, we've not been fortunate. But anyway, that's where we stand, and London is poorer because of that decision. We are out, and we're not going back. We have to make the best of a bad job, and I would be doing everything in my power to make sure London is outward looking, attracting international business like we always have done, and I would be working with the government. I would not be the enemy of the Tories. I would be working with them where I can, because they're in power, and they are in power till 2028.
Yeah, and one other quick side bit, if you don't mind. Like, apparently, one thing I'd heard is that Donald Tusk had said that David Cameron, he denies this, mind you, only went for the referendum pledge because he thought he'd get into another coalition with the Liberal Democrats, who he'd thought would vote against it. But you know, it turned out that backfired. It's only speculation, mind you. It's probably very well true. But yeah, but
I think you're right.
Yeah. The next question I want to ask you is that on the Social Democrats again, the party used to be very successful during the 1980s in its heyday, especially in London, where you used to have like at least 2 or 3 seats in the 1983 or 1987 general elections. How do you plan to recapture some of that old magic in this election?
You're going to help me. You're going to help me, right? Because the biggest problem that the SDP have is nobody knows they exist. Mm-hmm. They've been around for 40 years. I'll tell you now, I didn't know they existed. Just a couple of years ago, didn't even know they existed. We're in a situation where if you actually look on our website and you look at our policies, there's some very serious people in this party, you know, real policy think tankers. We've got top lawyers, we've got military people, we've got finance people, we've got people with policy experience coming up with a very cogent mix of policies that will make this country better. We are not woke, however you want to describe what woke means. We are traditional. We believe in the family. We will provide incentives for people to behave well. That's how governments should act. Governments should be a strong partner of business, but at the same time, make sure we don't get cartel-like situations like we have in property. How do we get there? Well, we've got the policies. We think we're getting the people. And Edward, you might not know this, but were I to get over 5% and get a PR representative on the GLA, if you look at all the other small parties, their candidate is also their number 1 GLA rep. I've deliberately made that not the case. So if I get 5%, the leader of the young Social Democrats, a very smart 26-year-old guy called Eric Sivajothi, will be on the GLA. We are building an SDP to have MPs by 2028. Because our prediction is Labour are falling apart. The Tories are going to be rampant. But we also have the memory that after 18 years last time the Tories were in, they were in from Maggie 1979 till John Major 1997. That was 18 long years during which the country got so sick and tired of the corruption and the sleaze that they voted in Tony Blair's government, and they had a good run at things. We believe that by 2028, the country will similarly be disgusted with the Tories. But if we have a Labour Party that is like this, well, I don't think we will. I think by 2028, the Labour will be screaming for PR. They'll be screaming. Every opposition party, apart from the Tories, will be screaming for proportional representation. Labour cannot ever win government again because they never have without Scotland. Without Scotland, Labour cannot ever win. And Labour have lost Scotland forever. So they will wake up to the fact they can never be a government again without PR. So by 2028, there will be PR, or rather there'll be such a clamour for it that it will be a huge part of the discourse at that time. And by then, we want the SDP to be a credible choice. And so, join my party now if you have ambition, because we're investing in youth. We want, we want you to be in your mid-30s by 2028 and an MP for the SDP.
Another thing, this is more based on your political stuff, and if you don't mind me asking, and I might have my information mixed up. If I have, please correct me on that. If I'm not mistaken, you used to be a Brexit Party member and ran for them in Eltham during the last general election. Why did you leave the party and now running on this ticket of the Social Democratic Party?
I was a very single issue member of that party. I am personal friends with Claire Fox. She's now Lady Fox of Buckley and in the House of Lords. She previously was a member of the Revolutionary Communist Party. She is left-wing. I am left-wing. There were left-wing members of the Brexit Party. Why were we there? Because we believed in democracy. In 2014, and if you'd asked me my views on Brexit, yeah, who cares? And I might have been 52, 48 to leave, but it wasn't a big deal. I wasn't bothered. Once the referendum took place and there was it's a simple question. Yeah, it's a simple question. Leave, remain. There was a very clear answer, leave, and then we should have left. And maybe what should have happened, well, I know what should have happened, is the day after that disaster, Theresa May should have crossed the floor of the House of Commons, grabbed hold of Jeremy Corbyn and said, come with me, mate, let's sit down and work out how the hell we get out of this mess. And in the end, the British people would have been quite happy to effectively have changed feet. We were always only ever in Europe with one foot, weren't we? We were part of Schengen. We didn't have the euro. It would have been quite easy for them, I think, to have just changed feet. They would have said, okay, well, we don't mind paying in a bit, and European Court of Human Rights, and well, all right, well, we'll let you a bit, but we want some of this, and we want some. There'd have been a negotiation. But instead, what actually happened was they all got together and thought, no, we can't have this. Let's fix it. Let's drop the age to 16. Let's create a people's vote, because it wasn't people who voted in 2016. It was only bigots and idiots. So they tried to throw democracy under the bus. And that, for me, that's the first time I ever got politically engaged. I've never been a member of a party, never been interested, always been a hard-working bloke. I've got 5 kids. I got interested in Parliament through a different avenue. I work with an all-party parliamentary group on whistleblowing. My business for the last 15 years, Edward, is getting people jobs. I run a recruitment firm, primarily in the city. And I have seen people's lives ruined because they did the right thing. They blew the whistle on bad practice. The law in this country is if you the maximum you can ever get paid for wrongful dismissal is 80 grand. 80 grand's a lot of money to some people, but if you're on a base salary of 150 grand a year plus bonus, 80 grand's not a lot. Big people in the city who see bad things happening, or insurance companies, or even medical, if you blow the whistle, you suddenly find that you're made redundant. When you can't get more than 80 grand, and then you'll never get a job again. I've been trying to change the law. I've been working with an all-party parliamentary group on whistleblowing, and in that capacity, I've met a lot of MPs. And remember, for the last 16 years, I interview people for a living. I'm good at interviewing people, and I met a lot of MPs, and I wouldn't have given most of them a job. They really are not very impressive people. So I suddenly thought, bloody hell, I could do this job better than them. And then along came, in 2019, the Brexit Party. I was incensed that the 2016 vote was definitely going to get thrown in the bin. Democracy was just going to be shoved aside. And I stood, and I was very uncomfortable with some of the political views of some of my colleagues. I found some wonderful, wonderful people there whose political views I disagree with, but wonderful people. But I was always a single issue democracy person. The moment, and I have to say, when Nigel Farage stood us down against the Tories, I was disgusted. I was in Eltham. I was standing against Clive Efford, who's somebody I respect and like. But he was representing a party that wanted to rejoin. And he still does, because this current Labour Party wants to rejoin. And, if the country gets together, if political parties get together and vote for me and we will rejoin Europe, and they win, that's democracy. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I'm a Democrat. But when we had that vote in 2016, and then by 2019, they were saying we needed to have actually a people's vote because it wasn't people in 2016. And let's drop the age to 16 so that we can make sure we win this time round. I had to do something. So I stood, and I resigned pretty much, immediately after the Tories got in. And I felt politically homeless because I was a left-winger who couldn't possibly vote for this Labour Party. And along came the SDP, who are a Labour Party that the Labour Party used to be and that the Labour Party ought to be.
And I hope you don't mind this being a sort of slightly churlish question. Why should London vote for the Social Democratic Party over the Liberal Democrats and their candidate, Lucia Porritt, given that her party are official continuation of the original SDP? I know this is a part of the break-off that David Owen started, but just, for context.
They are, if there's one thing that could come out of this interview, one thing that could, get out for people to recognise is just how completely different the Social Democrats are to the Liberal Democrats. There really is almost nothing that we can compare with. The Liberal Democrat Party is currently three completely separate political traditions under one very shoddy roof. You have in now let me think. What's the name? The really woke. What's her name? She's
Layla Moran.
That's the one. So she leads a very, very, very progressive wing of the Liberal Democrats, and they're so woke and progressive. She would be very, very comfortable in Sadiq Khan's Labour Party. There would be very, very little between them. Then you have currently the leader, is it Ed Davey?
Ed Davey, yes.
Was a very, very, he's a classic liberal free trader. He is someone who very much enjoyed his ministerial car keys and thoroughly enjoyed lying to the electorate about university fees to get into Parliament, pretending it was for the good of the country, then helping the Tories drive a disastrous austerity agenda through to 2015. And then was part of a party that, again, disastrously stated, vote for us, and we're just going to throw the whole Brexit thing in the bin. It never happened. It's a disaster. And the third part, so you've got the Layla Moran wing, you've got the Ed Davey classic liberal wing, very Tory, And then you've got the bulk of the party, the ground workers, the good, honest, local, like a communitarian, social democrats. These are the people who, they're in the wrong party. They should come home. And we're going to give them that home. And my ambition is that effectively we replace the Lib Dems by that 2028. And by 2028, if you were on our party list, Edward, you would have a chance of being one of, between 25 and 50 Social Democrat MPs. That's the target. That's why we're here. I'm laying down a marker and trying to get Londoners to recognise we're a credible party and we need your help.
So they're in the wrong party. I'm pretty sure that those members aren't the only ones who are in the wrong party for. I'm not saying what because they might get me in trouble, but never mind. One of the last questions I wanted to ask you was, if you don't win this position of London Mayor, what is next for you politically? Are you going to run a different seat, or are you going to run again from London Mayor or something like that? What's your...
No. I know I don't look it, but I'm 60 next birthday. I'm very happily, I run a great business. I've got 5 great kids. The reason why I'm doing this is I want, this is purely altruistic. This is purely communitarian. For me, I want to try and give a little bit back. I've been a school governor. I've coached cricket. I've been a youth worker. I do things in my spare time. I sing in a rock band. I do it. We raise money for charity, right? No sleep till Deptford. We're not very good, but we are a right laugh. I do things in my spare time to try and raise money for local charities. This was an opportunity to help the SDP set down a marker. As far as I'm concerned, I want to help London become a better place, but I don't have any ambition myself to do anything after this.
Do you think Sadiq Khan will win this election, even, whatever the outcome is? Do you think he'll still win, especially because the polling is a little bit closer now between him and his main rival? Do you think he'll still, do you think he'll still win?
Yes. The situation in London is very special. I think it's very special. I think that London does have a very large number of committed Labour voters. It has a fantastic organisation. I was part of the Brexit Party that fought a Peterborough by-election in 2019. You may remember.
I do, yes.
It was quite contentious. Because Labour won. They just won with an enormous postal vote. And that postal vote was extremely well organised on the ground and had a very clear ethnic location, brilliantly organised by on-the-ground Labour activists. In terms of who turned up on the day and voted, the Brexit Party won by a mile. But in London, Labour have a very well organised and very efficient postal voting gathering machine. I think he won't have won it, but he's probably got 800,000 votes already. You know what I mean? That are in the post. And on the day, he won't win on the first round. That's clear. But given second preferential, the way it works is it seems at the moment almost an insurmountable lead. I think that's a desperate shame. I think that the media haven't done enough to educate people that they have 2 or 3 votes. There is a PR element here. There is nothing stopping a committed Labour voter voting for an old school Labour Party like the SDP with their first vote and then sticking a second vote in for Labour just in case. But they're not going to do that because they're not aware. The media are not helping. And whilst I'm no conspiracy theorist, I note that Sean Bailey has lost funding from the Tory party. They're moving away from support for him. No serious Tory party MP stood for Mayor of London because they didn't want to look second rate compared to Boris. The Tories are telling everybody they're going to level up and they're going to move north. They're going to contest the Red Wall, and they've given up on London. So I think he will win, unfortunately. I don't think it's the right thing for London, but at least it will be democratic. And I will do what I can to beat him. And once the results are in, I'll do what I can to help him if he's mayor. But unfortunately, let's say, I'm very confident that on a one-on-one, I would more than be able to hold my ground in a debate. But our situation is, I'm not allowed. They won't allow me to debate him. He will only debate the powers that be have decided he'll only debate against the Tory and the Lib Dem and the Green. What's her name? Sean Berry?
Sean Berry, yeah.
Yeah, is this her third go?
I think it might be, but it's definitely second as far as I remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's definitely a second go. It might well be a third.
Yeah, possibly.
And she's made sure she's number one on the PR list. You've got to be mad to vote Green. In terms of, if you look at their policies, they want to break up the United Kingdom. That's like a number one policy. The Tories have abandoned Bailey, and as I said, the Lib Dems are an unvotable mess that have got everything wrong for 10 years. On every major decision, the Lib Dems have got it horribly wrong for 10 years. And that's your choice. That's they're saying that's your choice. You can't debate people like me or what's his name?
Sean Bailey?
No, he's in it, isn't he? Sean Bailey's being allowed.
Apologies.
Well, I'm just saying those below the top four, and who might they be? I mean, I really do think, we don't seem to appear on the polls because people don't know we exist. But if I were in debate with, I don't know, the guy, is it Rose? And
Brian Rose, him, London Real,
Rose, and who's the guy with all the money? Lawrence Fox.
Lawrence Fox,
money. Right, so those two guys are spending a fortune. They've got loads of money. They're spending a fortune. They've got billboards and buses, and they've got social media. And every time you turn on YouTube, you get one of their ads. And they've got loads of money. But if I was standing up in a TV debate with those guys, I think I could more than hold my own. When I was debating in Eltham, at least we had a few opportunities where I stood on the same platform as Clive Efford, who was a very good politician with 27 years of experience. I'm telling you now, I beat him every time. I out-debated him because I'm not a politician. I'm an intelligent man, but I'm not going to be allowed to debate these carrots, and that's wrong. That's just wrong. So you're going to help me. You're this podcast and any radio. Well, I'm not being allowed on any radio either. I phoned in a couple of weeks ago to debate with David Lammy on the Sewell report because I thought it was fantastic. They did let me on, and I did have a 7 or 8 minute very, very good discussion with David Lammy, but I had to do it under they got my word that I wouldn't tell anybody I was Steve Kelleher from the SDP. I had to just be Steve from Wellington. Yeah. We had a great debate. I put a strong case. He put a strong case back. We had a very, it was a good-natured and a clear debate. And in the end, I believe he had to cut me off because he couldn't come back. He couldn't come back on, my point was clear, which was that in a difficult world where there are difficult decisions to be made, where are limited resources, the Sewell report says at least on racism, we have come a very, very long way. And the way I put it, and I know this is, we're winding up now, when my parents came here as Irish immigrants in the 50s to rebuild London after the war, they were treated there was terrible racism in London. It was if you were an immigrant, you were thrown into the deep end of a swimming pool that was full of racism, misogyny, and homophobia. In the 1950s and 60s, same-sex love was a crime. That was London in the 50s and 60s. And you had to drown, sink, or swim in a very ugly swimming pool. That swimming pool now has been drained down to your knees or your ankles. And racism, misogyny, and homophobia are still present, but you're not drowning in them anymore. Across the road, there are still 2 swimming pools full, and people are drowning in them. One is full of drowning people in a swimming pool full of housing, and there's a swimming pool full of crime. And if you've only got one plug, if you're the mayor with limited resources, that report says it's terrible in that swimming pool that's up to your knees, but you're not drowning. I can redirect resources elsewhere. I'm not saying racism doesn't matter anymore.
Sure.
I'm saying that in a horrible world where I have to make difficult decisions, my priorities are elsewhere. And he couldn't come back on that one. So he cut me off.
Sort of like the whole James O'Brien situation where he cut off a Jewish caller because he was saying some, let's just say, interesting things about him, because he was talking about Trump's border wall. And just 1 or 2 more tidbits before I get to the last 2 questions. About sort of like the what you were saying about the Green Party earlier. I just want to say this is not necessarily reflect the view on myself. Maybe actually, I don't know. But also the candidates you mentioned earlier, Brian Rose and Lawrence Fox, are welcome to come on any time. As is the Green candidate, They turn me down, so boo. And the penultimate question I wanted to ask you is this is titled The Show. It's what I ask all my guests. What would your ideal world be?
Well, we are in the best world we've ever been in already. So things are pretty much better than they ever have been in the whole history of humanity. So we are on a good path. The best world for me would be one where there was more real democracy at local level. I think being politically engaged is really important. I strongly support what you're doing, and I would urge second school, from 10 years upwards, 10 years of age upwards, you should be politically engaged. You should have opinions. You should get involved with your local and then regional and then national organizations. There should be, in an ideal world, there'll be real proportional representation. In an ideal world, there'll be a real legal system that protects against oligarchy, cartel, and big business. That's a difficult one, but it can be done. In an ideal world, we would, I'm not, this isn't a utopia. Human beings do bad stuff. In an ideal world, we don't need police and we don't need armies because nobody does bad things and everybody's kind to each other. We know that's not going to happen. Human beings haven't changed in 5,000 years. So we know certain things don't work. We are, unfortunately, Edward, in a situation now where we are going down a path that has been trod many, many times before. If we carry on in our current pathway in London and in England, where you have a cartel that doesn't allow houses to be built unless they're guaranteed for extra profit, if you have a government that protects that cartel, people, the rich get richer and richer and richer, and a smaller and smaller number of them. The poor get poorer and poorer and poorer, and then you end up with, a Roman-like situation where you have citizens and slaves, and that can work for hundreds of years, and then it doesn't, and then everyone dies, and it goes to shit. We're fast on a pathway to societal breakdown when people of your generation recognise they're screwed with no hope. And my view is that by 2028, 2032, your priorities will be the priorities because we'll all be dead or, too old. And then you get a vindictive, revolutionary government rather than let's say, a market-friendly, left-leaning social democrat government. And the whole world goes to pieces. So my ideal world would be one where there is more political engagement, real proportional representation, and where local people feel that their voice is being heard, where there is more debate, and where big corporations pay fair taxes and are not allowed, by law, with real punishment, not allowed to collude against the population.
Indeed. And one last bit I have to go on before I ask you the final question. I just remember this from earlier. Like in the polls currently, there's a YouTuber called Nico Omilana who's at 5%. So pretty much anyone can. Yeah, this cause is still very much open if he could do very well, even though he's running as a joke. So I think anyone could do well on this, if I'm being honest.
Seriously, I saw it and I smiled last night because is he the guy that's following around Lawrence Fox with something on a van? I don't know.
No, you're thinking of Max Fosh. He's the other
that's
guy.
it. Sorry, that's the other guy. And what's his name? Count Binface.
Yeah,
all my best mates. All my best mates, and I'm very lucky. I still, all my best friends are still my mates from school. So my best friends I've known for 50 years or 40 years, and they're all looking for a bookie that they can put a bet on that Count Binface will get more votes than me, just for a laugh. Okay. And let's just say, there was a thing that happened a year or two ago where the government asked for popular opinion. They wanted to rename or name a new government ship.
Yeah.
And they were putting forward it should be called the Queen Elizabeth, or should it be called the Lord this or that. And we came back with Boaty McBoatface. Remember?
Yep, I do remember very well.
Yeah. All right. So in the end, people are fed up. They're looking and they see it's a fixed system. It looks almost inevitable that we're going to have a mayor re-elected whose record is disastrous. Just absolutely disastrous. But he's going to be re-elected, and along comes Binface and Boaty McBoatface type candidates, and it's a laugh to just have a go. I just wish they would realise, and they're not being allowed. I'm doing my best, and my party are doing our best to say, look at us, we're serious, we're on your side, we want to help, please come and join us. They don't even know we exist. We just got to keep trying because it's the right thing to do. And I wanted to thank you very much for the invite to come on your podcast.
Sure, yeah. I'm coming on to the final question actually, and all these joke candidates, and not all of them are Sadiq Khan. That's interesting. The final question I wanted to ask you is, this is, I'll be warned, this is the hardest one I usually ask, and it's a podcast that I usually ask this sort of stuff coming on. And if people wanted to find you and so on, and find out more information about your campaign, where do they find you? What websites? What social media do you have?
Okay, so it's Stephen with a V .Kelleher at sdp.co.uk. And I am found on Twitter at Steve K SDP. They're the two best ways to get me. We're desperate. I am desperate to connect with more people. I want you to join the party. I want you to be MPs in 2028 and 2032. It'll be way too late for me, but I'm here to help grow a credible left-wing alternative to what looks like a rampant Tory government. They've been in power for 11 years already, and they're trying to pretend they're a new government. They've driven the country through an austerity regime that is disastrous. We are finishing, I hope finishing, probably the biggest macroeconomic mistake of the last 100 years. You will be, did you say you, are you at university? Do you teach at university?
I finished university a couple of years ago.
Right. Well, all I'm saying is that by the time your children are at university, they will be studying the macroeconomic disaster that was the, not just Tory, but let's say Western government response to pandemic. This is a macroeconomic disaster. It should never happen again. Lockdowns do not work. They hurt. And in the next few years, the real costs of this lockdown will come through. We have a terrible problem with cancer. We have a terrible problem with mental health, all of which we're not seeing right now because it's a tsunami, right? It's coming. We just can't see it over the horizon at the moment. And Rishi Sunak's free money is making everybody feel that things are okay. That free money ends in September. By Christmas, things will be awful. By next year, they'll be worse. And by the time, as I say, your children are at university, they will be reading books about the macroeconomic disaster that was the policy response to the SARS-CoV-19 pandemic. Terrible, and it was a Tory government that did it.
Sure. Thank you for coming on once again, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you very much, Edward. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and share this video, as well as subscribe to the Ed Interviews YouTube channel, and also the Ed Interviews BitChute channel, and also look at my stuff on Mixcloud as well. I have more of this content coming in, and also subscribe to my Patreon subscribe star as well for more guest requests, as well as free copies of my old books. Until then, see you next time, guys.